why is it just me? None of the white men in the school, they wore khakis and a polo every day, and there was never an issue with them. But I put on khakis and a polo. It's a whole war. My work speak for itself. Why do I always have to put on and do more? So that's the thing about being Black. You always have to go over and beyond and do more than your non-Black or person of color counterparts to kind of show yourself as worthy. So I'm like, no, my work speaks for itself. My test scores speak for themselves. My kids are overperforming. I have the top scoring kids in the school. So that has nothing to do with what I look like. That has something to do, everything to do with my relationship with my students. I do a lot of curriculum and I do a lot of teaching based on identity and based on who I am, because I'm real big on connection to the content, because I teach literature. Okay. Why do we need to teach the Canterbury Tales? Why do we need to teach Frankenstein? Making those connections. And once I was able to make those connections for myself, I was able to make those connections for my students. And my students saw that I cared about them and I was invested in who they are and invested in their lives. So that's how I was able to be authentically myself and be present through the presence of my students. They saw my vulnerability in that state. So when you're vulnerable, your students respect you more because they know that you're willing to make mistakes. I love to say, I don't know everything. You teach me more that you know than I teach you on a daily basis.
Teaching and learning, there's a vulnerable space. It's even a vulnerable space to be a learner, right? Because you have to be open to not knowing. You have to be open to being challenged. You have to be open to making mistakes. And like, there is a part of teaching where if we want kids to be vulnerable in their learning space, like we have to be open and transparent and vulnerable as well, that we don't show up like this perfect teacher who, like we can't show up like that. If we want kids to engage in learning in a safe kind of way.
We're teaching our students, we have to teach them to be critical thinkers. We have to teach them to interrogate what they're reading. A lot of teachers are old school teachers, and when I teach professional development, I make sure that I'm telling them this is not even when I was in school. I graduated in 2007. This is not even then. This is not when I first started in 2012. This is a new day. We can't teach the way we used to teach. And a lot of teachers are still teaching in those antiquated ways where it's what I've learned and like to reference as the banking method. You're going to come and you're going to give, and I'm going to give it to you and you're going to take it as is. My answer is always, I don't know when my students ask questions. I have no idea. I'm just here to help facilitate your learning. So then I'm creating that space where they're being that critical thinker. They can look at it from different perspectives and come about that answer as how they want it or what they think it is, because literature is always interpretive. So when you create those spaces where students can interrogate, where students can be critical thinkers, they are more inclined to engage when they feel invested in the learning. Because when they're bringing something to the table, they're coming up with solutions, or when they're coming up with these things on their own, as opposed to, hey, the theme of this story is family. Now go and find evidence about why it's family. The reason I love literature is because if they can validate that answer based on textual evidence, I'll let you have it because it makes sense to me. When you push back and you engage in that conversation, that again creates that criticality of the students. And when they have that level of criticality, they can be more productive in citizens of the world. And when they're in spaces where who they are is being oppressed, they can actually be in a place where they can combat that. It's like, well, actually, because of X, Y, and Z, I deserve to be here. Not only do I deserve to be here, it's a privilege for me to present myself in your space.
So when that principal told you to not wear your tight pants, you obviously at that point were not in a space, right, where you could push back, challenge back the oppression lane that he was putting you in by telling you what you couldn't wear, right, and how you couldn't show up to work. How, because it seems like you're in that space now. So if that same principal were to come to you today and say that, I just saw the look in your face, yes, you would give him all the smoke, right?
Once I meshed my identity as a Black gay man to my identity as a Christian, then is when I was like, okay, I'm free to bloom. I'm free to be present. So when I had minorities of like white students or minorities of Asian students in my classes, for them to still be present and for them to still hone in on their identity as an Asian American, as a white American. That's what I wanted to create. I wanted to make sure that I'm fostering those relationships where I'm showing them it's okay to be you. No matter who you are, I'm still going to love you as my student. I'm still going to support you as my student. Because my goal as an educator is for you to learn. It's for you to grow. It's for you to take what I'm teaching you and apply it to your life experiences. I am who I am. If you don't like it, oh well, but I'm no longer hiding behind my shell. I'm no longer putting on all of these layers of clothing that I have to shed once I get into the bar, shed once I get home, shed once I go to every other space. You're going to get what you get each and every time.
People are not accepting of the multiple identities that students bring to the table, either don't honor the multiple identities that students bring to the table. What harm does that create in our educational space?
So students are not learning if they're not in an inclusive space. I'm a big proponent about that. Students are not fully attentive if they're not in an inclusive space. Even those students who are doing the oppression, those students are also not attentive and are not fully learning because they're too busy trying to shed light on somebody else's differences. They're too busy trying to make somebody else feel a type of way because of their differences. When you're not in an inclusive learning environment, then true, genuine learning is not taking place.
The focus on identity and agency, or even like conversations around identity and agency, for some teachers, that's like a new phenomenon in professional learning. Like, wait, what? You mean like, I thought I was here to talk about reading strategies. I thought I was here to talk about math strategies. Like, what do you mean I need to attend to a student's identity? So what is needed in professional learning spaces to even get teachers to understand that we just can't talk about strategies and not talk about identity at the same time?
When teaching professional development, I always start with not just, oh, my name is Marcus, I teach language arts. I need to know who you are. So when we put teachers in that space to really dig deep and figure out who they are and what they bring to the table, and when they are, and when they're in spaces where they are listening and receiving who their colleagues are, it gets them to think about what spaces that they're in, think about their identities. So no matter where I've taught or which space I've worked in, even when I was teaching in a predominantly Black school, the staff was not predominantly Black. So we had a multicultural staff. So if I was in that space when I was teaching professional development, which I have in that space, we talk about the differences that we have, and then how those differences bring awareness, and how those differences are beneficial to understanding how we can accomplish a goal. Then they'll see how, okay, I can use Tamala's difference from my difference, and I can actually pull from that and make my students better. So when they see firsthand how that multiculturalism can help their practice, can help their teaching, and how I can take later in that professional development session and show how the strategies that I'm teaching them are going to be embellished based on this multicultural perspective, they see firsthand what their students can accomplish when their identity too is attended to. Talk about who we are as educators in a space, a multicultural space where we're not all the same, then we also are experiencing what our students experience when they're in spaces where there are differences between them and their counterparts.
Talking about interrogating literacy and interrogating literature, like how can that even be made possible when we have legislation that's pushing us to ban, literature and certain pieces of literature, and how harmful that is to being able to teach students to think critically and to interrogate if we have people controlling the narrative around what we're able to even read.
I had meetings with my parents, and my parents were my biggest advocates. And the parents that I didn't have the strongest relationships with, because I had 120 students, I can't have 100. So that's times two if they had a 2-parent household. I can't have 250 plus parents that I'm just like have my cell phone number, because some of them just not gonna like me. And I'm not giving you my number. The parents were my biggest advocates. They would talk to their friends of students who they had in my classes, and they would understand why I want to teach this, because they knew that I loved their children. I wanted their children to really grow as productive citizens. So that's that relationship. And once they sign off, like, you signed it, like, so now what it is, you also have to educate your parents. You have to educate your administration. The reason critical race theory is an issue right now in legislative because of the ignorance. I'm so tired of hearing, oh, they're teaching critical race theory. You only teach critical race theory in collegiate spaces because it is a theory. We do not go in high school spaces and say, oh, so critical race theory is X, Y, and Z.
We're teaching kids how to think.
We're teaching people, exactly. We're teaching them how to be critical. We're teaching them criticality. We're teaching them the interrogation piece that I'm talking about. But you got to put a little sugar on it when you're talking about interrogating. You can't tell them, well, I'm asking you to question what your ancestors did. I'm just teaching you how to be more in tune and more in tune in yourself. So that's that whole piece about how do you blend the standards and how do you blend legislation to that criticality piece. It's all about educating, and you got to start locally, because when you get change happens in your local races and not in the presidential race. If my parents are on board with it and I can show my parents what I'm doing, I can explain to my parents how it relates to their students and how it relates to them, they're then going to take that application when it comes to them voting for their local races. And when they vote for the proper people in their local races, like legislative, they can make change in the legislative branches. And then if they still take that sense, it doesn't matter which political party you in, you can take their platform and think about what they're saying, and you can vote for them, and you can have top-down change. So it's all about that education piece. Liberation comes from knowledge. Pretty much.
Yep. Liberation comes from knowledge. If you had to describe the power of a Black teacher in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Representation, liberation, agency. I am an educator. I'm a teacher of all people. I'm a teacher of all things. I am a teacher by heart. I'm a teacher by spirit. A lot of my work is about language. A lot of my work is about identity and being agency. We are who we are because we say we are. So when we say we are somebody, we live in that truth. And when we live in our truth, we live our authentic selves. So when you're unapologetically who you are true to yourself. That's why I am multiple. I'm a father. I am a brother. I'm a son. I'm an uncle. I'm a godfather. I'm all of these things. I'm a husband. When you think about who you are, you got to tell yourself each and every day, I am somebody. It's like Professor Clark. I am somebody.